got a little better. The mayor was on cue there. Good morning. Good morning. Well, it's wonderful to see you here today. My name is Tim Good. I'm the superintendent of Lincoln Home National Historic Site. We have an all-star cast here today: Secretary of Interior, Congressman LaHood, Congressman Davis, and of course Teresa Haley. You know, I was thinking in my 30-year Park Service career, I can't think of another opportunity I've had to speak to a group of people who work so tirelessly to save a critical piece of American history. But the work you did in the Springfield race riot, I would contend, is part of a long legacy here in Springfield. Right in this neighborhood, there were people also fighting for civil rights. A half a block down here is a site where Jamison Jenkins, an African-American, worked on the Underground Railroad. Of course, right behind me, Abraham Lincoln, who issued the Emancipation Proclamation and also fought for the passage of the 13th Amendment that abolished slavery. And the house, the gray house right there, was the boyhood home of Julius Rosenwald. He led Sears Roebuck and Company, became one of the greatest philanthropists in American history, and helped finance the schools for African Americans throughout the South. Because Rosenwald knew education was the key. What Jenkins, what Lincoln had done could easily be forgotten. But by preserving the Springfield race riot site, Springfield has enabled the nation to have a new tool to interpret this critical piece of American history. And so today, when Secretary Barnhart signs the document, he's going to be doing something that will make history, but will also advance the cause of civil rights in America. It's now my privilege to introduce Congressman Darren LaHood, who has an office just a few blocks from Lincoln's home.
Thank you, Mr. Superintendent. Well, thank you, Superintendent Good. And what a great day in Springfield. Wonderful weather today. It could have been 90 degrees and humid, but welcome to everybody here today. I want to just acknowledge Superintendent Tim Good for the wonderful work that he does, his 30 years of experience with the National Park Service. He's the author of 4 books on the history of Abraham Lincoln. We are so lucky to have him in Springfield. Please give him a round of applause for all his great work and service to our country. Well, I'm awful proud, along with Congressman Davis, to represent Springfield and represent the history of Abraham Lincoln. And sometimes when we're in D.C., Rodney and I get into an argument about who represents Lincoln's district, because where we're at today is Rodney's district, but if you go up to where Abraham Lincoln is buried, that is my district. So I have the body, so I like to say I represent the district, but it's a good problem to have. We are both so proud of Abraham Lincoln's legacy and representing parts of his congressional district, which of course he served 1847 to 1849. We're here today for a very important event, and I just want to acknowledge that the race riot site, which we were there earlier today, is such an important part of Springfield's history and our nation's history. It represents one of the 3 worst race riots in our nation's history that took place here in Springfield. Terrible acts of violence took place at that site, and we need to remember that history, and that's what today is all about. This area played a key role in the formation of the NAACP, and we're going to hear from Teresa in a second here, which launched as the organization a few years after that. In the years that followed, tireless work was done to improve race relations in Central Illinois because of the riot, and it's important that we preserve the site for present and future generations so that we never forget what occurred. That's why I've joined with Congressman Rodney Davis in an effort in Congress introducing legislation to make this site the National Historic Monument for that race riot. While in that process, we have worked with Secretary Barnhart and are so happy to have him here today, his first time in Springfield, as he adds this as the 30th edition to the American Civil Rights Network, an important recognition and a step towards that monument happening. And today's designation will formally recognize the historical significance of that race riot, and that is so important. So I want to thank the Secretary and his team and his leadership for its efforts, and we look forward to continuing to work with him as we elevate this site to the level of a national monument and preserve the history. With that, I want to next introduce Teresa Haley. All of us know Teresa as a leader in our community here in Springfield. She is the head of the NAACP here in Springfield and the state of Illinois. She is a wonderful asset for our community, and I always say I like to speak before Teresa instead of after her, because she likes to steal the show. Please give a warm welcome to Teresa Haley, and this event would not be happening without Teresa's leadership. Teresa.
Yeah. Thank you for those kind words. Oftentimes I talk about his father, the LaHood that I know. I am so grateful to stand before you today. The NAACP has a long legacy and history, and I am proud to be a native of Springfield, Illinois. But I want to say especially to the Secretary of Interior, welcome. The sun is shining because you're here today. God decided to bless us with great weather, and we're so grateful. Mr. Mayor, thank you for all that you continue to do to support the Springfield branch of the NAACP and our initiatives as we move forward. Congressman Rodney Davis is my personal friend, and I don't care who cares about it, because it's not about politics, it's about people. And that's what the NAACP is about. Sometimes people say, well, the NAACP is just about black folks. No, that's wrong. Learn your history. The NAACP is about all folks. People fought, bled, and died for us to sit out here today. And because you're here today, give yourself a hand. I often tell people that God is not only a good God, he is a great God. He has allowed us to come together. He has reminded us of our past. And if you don't know your past, you won't know your future or how to prepare for it. Last weekend, the Springfield branch honored our 112th commemoration of the 1908 race riots. We announced our brand new building. We have never had our location. So now we're gonna have a one-stop shop where people who have complaints can come in and talk to us. We're gonna have office space. We're gonna house our back-to-school, stay-in-school academy. So we have an academy that is over 25 years old. We take the best of the best and the brightest of the brightest, kids who have been kicked out of their school systems. We mentor those kids. We educate those kids. We have a 99% graduation rate. Give it up for our program. I've often said, before I die, I want to make sure that Springfield branch NAACP has its own building, and God has blessed us and me with that opportunity. I also wanted to make sure that we had an historical site, such as the Race Riot Monument. And because of the Secretary coming to Springfield today, it lets me know that we're one step closer to that. Again, Secretary of Interior, thank you so much for greeting us with your blessing. Let's give a hand. At this time, I'm going to turn it over to a very dear friend of mine. As I said before, it's not about politics, it's about people. We wouldn't be out here today, and the Race Riot Monument wouldn't be moving forward without our Congressman, Rodney Davis. I called Rodney a couple of weeks ago when we found out we were going to be working on the Race Riot monuments. And he says, I can't come out and participate in anything for 2 weeks, Teresa, because of COVID. And I am just so grateful that he's here today, and that this time I'm going to turn it over to our Congressman, Rodney Davis. Let's give him a hand.
Thank you. Thank you, Teresa. Oh, thank you. And Darren's right. You do not want to follow Teresa Haley. She's just great. All of you know the work that she puts in. And I got to echo the words that Congressman LaHood said. This day today, what we're doing here with Secretary Bernhardt would not have happened without the leadership of Teresa Haley and the Springfield chapter of the NAACP. Give yourselves a round of applause, and thank you. Secretary Bernhardt and I have gotten to know each other over his time as one of the president's members of the cabinet. And we've had a lot of time to talk about issues like this, but there's one thing about the secretary that I appreciate. He immediately turns the conversation not to what he does in Washington, D.C., in the most beautiful office that anybody can have out in that city. He turns it right back here to people like Superintendent Tim Good and the men and women who work at this site. Well, all of you who work to make this site what it is, please stand up and be recognized for what you do.
You got a blue and green uniform on.
Thank you all very, very much for what you do here. This matters. And to be able to be standing here at Lincoln's home, to watch the Secretary sign a designation, to put this race riot site onto the African American Civil Rights Network is something that makes me proud to not just represent this area, but makes me proud to have grown up here. We are, we're working the next steps. The next steps are, as Congressman LaHood said, we want to pass a piece of legislation that will get the race riot site recognized as a national monument. But I got to give some credit to one of my colleagues, Lacey Clay out of Missouri. He's the one who established the Civil Rights Network legislation in 2017. He's the reason why we have this event here today to start us on that path forward to continue to work with the Department of Interior. This site, and I got to give credit to the folks that are here from Hanson Engineering. I see Satch and Kevin and others, the archaeologists who dug up these artifacts. Thank you, because without all of your hard work for years, we wouldn't be able to recognize what has been found and put a path forward to the future. The site and the artifacts, as we know, were unearthed during the Carpenter Street Rail project here in Springfield, just a few blocks away. That project turned out great, but in the end, the legacy of that project is going to live on forever here, not just Springfield, but live on forever as part of the African American Civil Rights Network. That is something, and you all ought to be proud of that. This site absolutely represents one of the 3 worst race riot sites in the nation. The home of Abraham Lincoln, at the same time, when these riots occurred, we know that it was part of the formation of the NAACP. Ida B. Wells Barnett, a key leader in the African American Civil Rights Movement, launched an anti-lynching campaign after what happened here in 1908 to end the violence against African Americans as a result of the events here in Springfield. Just a year later, NAACP was established and has worked tirelessly to ensure race relations improve in this country. The Springfield Race Riot Site is going to join 28 other historic sites. The Pullman National Monument in Chicago, which recognizes the first major labor agreement between a company and the Brotherhood of Sleeping Car Porters, the first African-American-led labor union. This will join the Selma to Montgomery National Historic Trail, which traces the route of the 1965 Voting Rights March. And this will also join the AP Tour Road House in Louisiana, which was the home of the prominent civil rights attorney and legal counsel for the NAACP for more than 3 decades. The events at this site, like others in it, will serve to recognize that racial injustice was not an isolated issue only to the South, but one to be addressed across this great country. I'm grateful for the opportunity to continue to move forward. We must preserve and protect what we found here in Springfield, and we must thank this secretary for recognizing the importance of what has been unearthed, what has been worked on, and what Springfield, Illinois means to our nation's history in the civil rights movement. Now, I got to tell you, I've often said my favorite cabinet secretary I've ever had a chance to work with has been Sonny Perdue, the Secretary of Ag. He's been here numerous times. I've spent a lot of time with him. But I got to tell you, after spending some time with Secretary Bernhardt in Iowa and here and out in Washington, D.C., Sonny's now a close second, buddy. I want to welcome the Secretary of the Interior, David Bernhardt, to Springfield, Illinois, and please stand and give him the warmest welcome that you can. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That was awesome. Good job, Rodney. Good morning. Thank you for that introduction. I will tell you, Sonny Perdue is actually my favorite cabinet member too. So he's a heck of a guy. He's a great man to spend time with. First off, before I begin, let me say thank you to everyone that's here from the National Park Service. What a treasure to have a chance to walk through the home right behind us. And everyone in the Park Service works so hard to tell America's story. And we so deeply appreciate everything you do. And America appreciates everything you do for us. I also want to thank Teresa and Congressman LaHood, each for your remarks, and Congressman Davis. They're wonderful remarks. Teresa, you're a dynamo. There's no doubt about that. You know, the African American Civil Rights Network, as Congressman Davis said, was signed into law very recently. And it really came about as a recognition that in too many places across the country, precious historic waypoints that were on the route to the civil rights movement were being forgotten, and those untold stories were at risk of not being remembered. And with that enactment came the hope that the designation of the sites would honestly tell the full and sometimes painful story of the struggle of civil rights, to foster healing, tolerance, and understanding among all Americans. Earlier this year, at the direction of President Trump, I designated the John Hope Franklin Reconciliation Park in Tulsa, Oklahoma, as an official member of the African American Civil Rights Network. And today, as I stand here, I want to take you back just for a moment to the heat in August, which doesn't seem that bad today, but it had to be significant in 1908. And now, as we stand here in front of the former home of President Lincoln, and we reflect on Lincoln's vision, knowing what occurred here in Springfield, we come together to establish the network edition of this very site. And this is a site that must be remembered. We must reflect upon it. We must remind ourselves of how far we've come, and remind each of us how important it is to walk forward on your pathway of life with tolerance, with understanding, so that we all can move to that great ideal that was the movement from the Articles of Confederation to the Constitution of a more perfect union. And so it is with great respect and humility that I will be designating the 1908 Springfield Race Riot Archaeological Site as a part of the African American Civil Rights Network, and I will do that now. Thank you.
Members of the NAACP, you want to come up? And also Representative Murphy, Andy, Chairman.
Yeah. This is the only time it's going to happen, so we should make sure everybody gets in the picture that wants it. All right, we ready? Okay, no, I'm a little short.
I'll stay behind.
Nice signature.
Bye.
Teresa.
There you go. Nice. Thank you so much. Awesome. All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you all. Thanks for being here.